I sat across from Madison Hartwell, the founder's daughter and newly appointed VP of Operations, watching her blame me for a failed product launch that happened over the weekend. Her voice was sharp, accusatory, but I knew the truth. I had warned her 3 times via email about the server capacity issues. She ignored every warning because she wanted to impress the board with an early launch. Now 20,000 users were locked out, and Madison was pointing her perfectly manicured finger directly at me, calling me incompetent in front of the entire executive team. Let me back up 3 months so you can understand how I ended up in that conference room, fighting for my professional life. My name is Deirdre, and 4 years ago I joined Hartwell Technologies as a junior project coordinator. I was 24, fresh out of college, and desperately grateful for the opportunity. The company made educational software for underprivileged schools, and that mission meant everything to me. I grew up in a small town in rural Ohio where our school barely had computers. The idea of helping kids access better education drove me to work harder than anyone else in the office. I climbed fast. Within 18 months, I was promoted to project manager. 2 years after that, senior project manager. I earned every step through late nights, weekend work, and an obsessive attention to detail that became my reputation. If Deirdre is on the project, it gets done. That was what people said about me, and I wore it like a badge of honor. The company itself was special. Thomas Hartwell, the founder, was a visionary engineer who genuinely cared about making a difference. He built a culture where people felt valued, where we celebrated wins together, where the office golden retriever named Biscuit greeted everyone at the door each morning. We had 75 employees, and it truly felt like a family. Monthly Pizza Fridays were not corporate obligations but real celebrations. People stayed late not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I loved that place with my whole heart. Then Thomas had a heart attack 2 years ago. He was 66 at the time, and the doctors told him to slow down. He semi-retired, coming into the office just once or twice a week, handing more responsibility to his leadership team. He was grooming someone to take over eventually. We all assumed it would be Priya, our brilliant CTO, or maybe Richard, the CFO who understood the business inside and out. First, she eliminated our weekly all-hands meetings, said they were inefficient, that we could communicate through email instead. Those meetings were how our small company stayed connected, how engineers knew what the sales team was working on, how we celebrated wins together. Without them, departments became silos. Next, she cut our QA team from 8 people to 4. Quality assurance, she explained in a memo, was a redundant expense. Developers should test their own code. Never mind that QA caught critical bugs before they reached customers, that they saved us from disasters monthly. 4 talented people were let go, including Sarah, who had been testing our education software for 6 years and understood it better than anyone. Then Madison started pushing aggressive deadlines without consulting the technical leads. She would promise clients delivery dates that were physically impossible, then act surprised when we pushed back. Her response was always the same. Work smarter, not harder. Find efficiencies. Be more agile. She also hired her former sorority sister, Amber, as Chief Innovation Officer, a role that did not exist before and whose responsibilities no one could quite define. Amber was nice enough, but she had no tech experience and spent most of her time agreeing enthusiastically with whatever Madison said. I watched these changes with growing concern, but I kept my head down and did my work. I created detailed reports explaining why certain timelines were unrealistic. I volunteered to train Madison on our technical processes. I stayed late to make up for the lost QA staff, catching bugs myself. I told myself this was temporary, that Madison would learn, that things would stabilize. Then I discovered something that changed everything. One afternoon, I was walking past the break room when I overheard 2 board members talking. They were getting coffee, discussing the previous month's presentation. One of them, a venture capitalist named Donald, said he was really impressed with Madison's strategic vision for expanding into the corporate training market. The other board member, Patricia, agreed. She said the presentation showed real depth of analysis, particularly the competitive landscape research and the go-to-market strategy. My stomach dropped. I knew that presentation. I had spent 3 weeks researching the corporate training market on Madison's request. She said she wanted to understand expansion possibilities and asked if I could put together an analysis. I worked nights and weekends, interviewing potential customers, analyzing competitors, building financial projections. I created a 40-page strategy document with detailed recommendations. I sent it to Madison, and she thanked me for the helpful background research. Apparently, she had presented my entire strategy document to the board word for word, taking credit for all of it. The presentation that landed us a $2 million corporate contract was my work, my research, my strategy, and no one knew. I stood in that hallway, coffee forgotten, feeling something shift inside me. This was not a misunderstanding or an oversight. This was deliberate. Madison had stolen my work and claimed it as her own. I said nothing. I did not confront her or tell my coworkers, but I started keeping records. Screenshots of emails, timestamps of my work, notes from meetings. I was not sure why, exactly. Just instinct. A sense that I might need evidence someday. I had no idea how soon that day would come. 6 weeks before that disastrous Monday morning meeting, things started spiraling out of control. Madison announced 3 major product launches over the next 4 months. Normally, we did 1 significant launch per year, maybe 2 if we were aggressive. 3 launches in 4 months, with a reduced team, was not ambitious. It was impossible, but when I raised concerns in the planning meeting, Madison smiled at me like I was a child afraid of the dark. "That is exactly the kind of thinking we need to change," she said. "We have been too conservative. Our competitors are moving faster. We need to be bold." Bold. That was her favorite word. Bold decisions, bold strategies, bold moves. What she really meant was reckless. My team was already down 2 people from the QA cuts, and we had not been given budget to hire replacements. We were handling the workload of 10 people with 8. Now Madison wanted us to triple our output. I started coming in earlier, staying later, trying to keep all the plates spinning. 7 o'clock in the morning became my new normal. Leaving at 8 o'clock at night felt like slacking off. Then I started working Saturdays. Just a few hours at first, to catch up on emails and planning, then full Saturdays, then Sundays too. I told myself it was temporary, just until we got through this busy period. But the busy period never ended. It just kept intensifying. I had not had a full day off in 5 weeks. My apartment became just a place to sleep. I ate dinner at my desk most nights, usually takeout that I barely tasted. Madison sent a company-wide email celebrating the deal, saying it demonstrated our commitment to client success. The problem was that custom integration would take at least 6 months to build properly, maybe longer, depending on the complexity of their legacy systems. Madison had promised it in 6 weeks. I found out when the client called me directly to schedule a kickoff meeting. I pulled up the contract, read the specifications, and felt my blood pressure spike. This was not remotely feasible. I immediately went to Madison's office. "We need to talk about the Northridge Academy integration," I said. She glanced up from her phone. "Great project, right? Big client, big opportunity." "Madison, this is not possible in 6 weeks. This is a 6-month project, minimum." She frowned. "Deirdre, I need you to be a team player here." I told them 6 weeks. Then we need to call them back and reset expectations. If we promise something we cannot deliver, we will lose the client and damage our reputation. "You are being very negative," Madison said. Her voice had an edge now. "Maybe you need to think more creatively about solutions instead of focusing on problems." I spent the next 3 weeks working 12-hour days, including weekends, to create a workaround solution. It was not the full integration Madison promised, but it was functional enough to satisfy the client in the short term, with a roadmap for full integration over the next 6 months. I presented it to the client myself, managing their expectations, explaining the technical limitations. They were disappointed, but understood. Crisis averted. The following week, the company newsletter featured a story about the successful Northridge Academy partnership. The article quoted Madison extensively, praising her innovative approach to client relationships and her hands-on problem-solving. My name appeared once, in a list of team members who contributed to the project. I was too exhausted to even feel angry. I just felt hollow. Then, on a Friday afternoon, something happened that I will never forget. Our lead infrastructure engineer, Marcus, discovered a critical security vulnerability in our main product. A configuration error had left a database endpoint exposed. If exploited, someone could potentially access student data from every school using our software. This was catastrophic. We could face lawsuits, lose our contracts, destroy the trust we had spent 12 years building. Marcus found it at 4:30 in the afternoon. I was in a meeting when he burst in, face pale. He explained the situation, and my heart stopped. I immediately emailed Madison, marking it urgent, explaining the vulnerability and recommending we take the system offline immediately to patch it. She responded 30 minutes later, "I am sure it is fine. We will discuss Monday." Stop being so dramatic. I stared at that email, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. She wanted to wait through the weekend, leaving thousands of children's personal information vulnerable because she did not want to deal with it on a Friday evening. I called her. She did not answer. I texted her. No response. So I made a decision. I told Marcus we were patching it immediately, with or without approval. I called in the infrastructure team. We worked all Friday night, through Saturday, and into Sunday morning. I coordinated the patch deployment, tested every system, verified the fix, and wrote documentation for the codebase. By Sunday afternoon, the vulnerability was closed. I had not slept in 30 hours. Monday morning, Madison walked into the staff meeting with a serious expression. She announced that over the weekend, she had identified and resolved a critical security vulnerability, demonstrating the importance of vigilant leadership. She thanked the infrastructure team for their rapid response to her direction. I sat in that meeting, too tired to even process what was happening. Everyone nodded appreciatively. Marcus glanced at me, confusion in his eyes. He knew the truth, but the infrastructure team assumed Madison had directed the work. They did not know she had told me to wait until Monday. After the meeting, I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, skin pale and drawn. I had lost weight I did not have to lose. I looked sick. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. Madison was not just taking credit for my work. She was actively stealing my accomplishments, rewriting history to make herself look like a competent leader. And she was getting away with it because I was too busy actually doing the work to defend myself. I needed to do something. But I was so tired, I could barely think straight. I just went back to my desk and kept working. 3 weeks before that Monday morning disaster, I finally did the math. I sat at my kitchen table on a rare night. I made it home before 9 o'clock, opened a spreadsheet, and calculated my hours for the past 8 weeks. 320 hours of unpaid overtime. 320 hours beyond my contracted 40-hour weeks. That was 8 full weeks of additional work, completely uncompensated. My salary was $72,000 a year. I had looked up market rates for senior project managers in Austin with my experience level. The range was $90,000 to $110,000. I was being paid 20% below market rate, and that was before factoring in all my unpaid overtime. When I divided my actual earnings by my actual hours worked, I was making about $22 per hour. Junior developers fresh out of college were starting at $80,000, working 40-hour weeks. I was effectively making less than entry-level employees. The numbers stared back at me from the screen, undeniable and stark. I was being exploited, and I had let it happen because I loved the mission, because I believed in the company, because I thought loyalty and hard work would be rewarded. I decided to ask for a raise. I spent a week preparing a detailed proposal. I documented every major project I had led over the past 2 years. 5 successful product launches, 15 major client implementations, a client retention rate of 97% under my management. I gathered market research showing comparable salaries. I put together a presentation that was calm, professional, and backed by data. I was not asking for the high end of market rate. I was requesting $90,000, a 25% increase but still below what I could make elsewhere. Given my contributions, it was more than fair. It was modest. I rehearsed my pitch in front of my bathroom mirror. I anticipated objections and prepared responses. I wanted to sound confident but not demanding, assertive but not aggressive. I scheduled a meeting with Madison for a Thursday afternoon. That meeting changed everything. Madison's office was on the corner of our floor, with windows overlooking downtown Austin. She had redecorated since taking over, replacing Thomas family photos and technical books with modern art and motivational posters. One of them said "Hustle" in large letters. I had always found it ironic. I sat across from her desk, pulled out my proposal, and began my presentation. I walked through my contributions, showed her the market research, explained my request. I kept my tone professional and warm. This was just a business conversation between colleagues. Madison listened, barely glancing at the documents I had brought. She looked at her phone twice while I was talking. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been told something adorably naive. "Deirdre," she said, "I appreciate your work. I really do. But you are being selfish asking for a raise." The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. After 4 years of loyalty, after 320 hours of unpaid overtime in just the last 2 months, after missing my best friend's wedding and my nephew's birthday and countless weekends and evenings, I was being selfish for asking to be paid fairly. "The company is tightening belts right now," Madison continued. She was wearing a designer blouse I recognized from a boutique downtown. It probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her new BMW was parked in the executive spot outside. "We all have to make sacrifices. I understand budget constraints," I said carefully, "but I am asking to be paid market rate for my position and experience level. There are plenty of younger workers who would kill for your position," she said. "People who understand that mission comes before money. If you really cared about what we do here, compensation would not matter so much." I felt my hands start to shake. I put them in my lap so she would not see. "I do care about the mission. That is why I have been working 60-hour weeks trying to keep these projects on track." "That is your choice," Madison said. "No one is forcing you to work weekends. If you are not managing your time efficiently, that is something you need to address. My time. My efficiency. As if the impossible deadlines and reduced staff were my fault. As if I was choosing to work myself into exhaustion for fun." I opened my mouth to argue, to list all the ways her decisions had created this situation. Then I stopped. Something inside me went very quiet and very clear. She was never going to see it. She was never going to acknowledge my contributions or value my work. To her, I was a resource to be used, not a person to be respected. And no amount of arguing would change that, so I took a breath and said the only thing I could say. "You are right." Madison looked surprised. She had clearly expected an argument. A flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. "I am glad you understand. We are a family here, Deirdre. Family does not nickel and dime each other." I nodded, gathered my documents, thanked her for her time, and left her office. I walked back to my desk in a daze. My coworkers were focused on their screens, headphones on, oblivious to the fact that my world had just shifted on its axis. I sat down, stared at my computer, and felt absolutely nothing. Numbness is a strange mercy sometimes. Then I needed to use the restroom. I walked down the hall, and as I passed Madison's office, I heard her voice. Her door was slightly ajar. She was on the phone. "Can you believe she actually asked for a raise?" Madison's voice was clear, dripping with disdain. "Like she is irreplaceable. Please. I could replace her with a college grad for 50,000. She is lucky I did not fire her for the audacity." I stopped walking, put my hand on the wall to steady myself, stood there in the hallway, listening to my boss mock me for asking to be paid fairly. "Anyway, enough about that," Madison continued. "Are we still on for drinks Friday? I need to vent about this place. Sometimes I swear I am surrounded by idiots. I do not remember walking to the restroom. I do not remember the rest of that afternoon. I just remember driving home that evening and sitting in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for 20 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Then I made a decision. Starting immediately, I was working exactly 40 hours per week. Not 39, not 41, exactly 40. The amount I was contractually obligated to work. the amount I was being paid to work. If Madison could replace me with a college grad for $50,000, then she could get exactly $50,000 worth of work from me. Actually, she would get $72,000 worth of work, but only during business hours. No more nights, no more weekends, no more sacrificing my health and my life for a company that saw me as disposable. I went inside, ordered Thai food delivery, and watched a movie. I could not even tell you what movie it was, but I sat on my couch, ate pad thai, and felt something I had not felt in months. Relief. Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, I saved my work and shut down my computer. Brian, one of the developers on my team, looked up in surprise, heading out. Yep, but the server migration is tomorrow. I thought we were all coming in. I have plans, I said, and pulled my purse over my shoulder. Oh. He looked confused. Okay, I guess we will see you Monday then. See you Monday. I walked to my car, feeling the eyes of the office on my back. Deirdre leaving at 5 o'clock on a Friday before a major weekend project was unprecedented. Deirdre leaving at all was unusual. I had become the person who was always there, always available, always willing to sacrifice. Leaving on time felt like a radical act. She cried a little when I told her I was taking the weekend off. She said she had been so worried. Sunday, I kept my phone off all day. I cleaned my apartment. I did laundry. I cooked a real dinner. I felt like a person again instead of a machine. Sunday night, around 11 o'clock, I finally turned on my work phone. It exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, all from Madison. The progression was fascinating in a dark way. The first messages, from Saturday morning, were demanding. Where are you? Call me immediately. We need you at the office. By Saturday afternoon, they were angry. This is completely unprofessional. Your absence is noted. Saturday evening, they turned pleading. Deirdre, please. The migration is not going well. We really need your help. By Sunday morning, they were panicked. The servers are still down. Clients are going to notice. Please call me back. I did not call back. I went to bed. Monday morning, I arrived at the office at 9 o'clock. Not 7:30, not 8, 9, my contracted start time. The server migration had finally been completed Sunday evening, 12 hours later than planned. The system was running, but it was buggy. Issues were popping up everywhere. The team looked exhausted, red-eyed, frustrated. I spent Monday helping fix the problems. During work hours, at 5:30, I logged off and went home, even though the system was not fully stabilized. Brian stayed until midnight, finishing what I had started. Tuesday, Madison stopped by my desk mid-morning. She looked tired, which was unusual. Madison was normally perfectly put together, every hair in place, makeup flawless. Today, there were shadows under her eyes. Everything okay? She asked, her tone carefully casual. You seem a bit disconnected lately. Everything is great, I said with a smile. Just following your advice about work-life balance. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she could not argue. Advocating for work-life balance was part of her public persona, even if she expected everyone to work constantly. Well, good. Just making sure you are still engaged with your work, fully engaged during work hours, I said. 40 hours per week, just like my contract specifies. She opened her mouth, closed it, and walked away. The pattern continued. Wednesday. We had a critical client demo on Thursday that needed preparation. Normally, I would have stayed late Wednesday night to perfect the materials. Instead, I worked on it during the day, got about 70% done, and left at 5:30. Brian, loyal and hardworking, stayed until midnight to finish it. Thursday morning, Brian looked like he had not slept. The demo went okay. Not great. The client seemed underwhelmed. In our debrief afterward, Madison asked pointed questions about why the presentation was not more polished. I explained that I had worked on it during my scheduled hours, which was all the time available. Brian looked uncomfortable but did not contradict me. Friday afternoon, at 4 o'clock, a critical issue emerged with one of our production systems. A bug that was causing data sync failures for about 30 clients. Normally, I would have dropped everything and worked through the evening to fix it. Instead, I documented the issue thoroughly in an email to Madison, copied the relevant team members, outlined the steps needed to resolve it, and logged off at 5 o'clock sharp. Marcus, the infrastructure lead, stayed late and fixed it. He looked at me strangely as I packed up my bag to leave, like he did not quite recognize me. I did not blame him. I did not quite recognize myself either. My coworkers were noticing the change. Some seemed confused. A few looked envious. Brian told me over lunch that he respected what I was doing, that we should not have to live at the office. Erin, another project manager, quietly asked if I was looking for another job. No, I told her. Just working the hours I am paid for. That weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I lived my life. I went to a farmer's market. I cooked real meals. I drove to see my sister and spent time with my nephew, who had gotten so big since I last saw him. We played video games and built a fort out of couch cushions. He asked where I had been, why I never visited anymore. I did not have a good answer. Sunday evening, I sat in my apartment, reading a book in the fading sunlight, and felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Peace. Maybe with a side of guilt, but mostly peace. I knew the storm was coming. I knew Madison would not tolerate this indefinitely. But I did not regret my choice. Monday morning, I pulled into the office parking lot at 8:45. As I parked, I saw Madison's BMW already there, in her reserved spot near the entrance, and then I saw something that made my heart rate spike. Madison was standing next to my usual parking space, arms crossed, waiting. She looked stressed in a way I had never seen before. Her makeup was not quite right. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, looked hastily done, and her expression was tight, almost desperate. I parked, gathered my bag, and got out of my car. Madison walked toward me immediately. "Deirdre, we need to talk." "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "What can I help you with?" "The Silverline product launch is this weekend. I need you to come in both Saturday and Sunday. The board is watching this closely. I am sorry, I have plans." Madison's professional mask slipped. "Plans? What plans?" "Personal plans. Deirdre, this is a critical launch. The company needs you." "Then it should have been scheduled with proper preparation time," I said. My voice was calm, almost pleasant. "I provided timeline recommendations 2 months ago. You chose to move forward on an accelerated schedule. Are you seriously going to let the team down like this?" Other employees were arriving now, parking their cars, walking past us toward the building. People were watching. Madison seemed to realize this, and her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "I need you there." "I am working my contracted hours," I said. "If the launch is not ready, that is a management issue, not an employee dedication issue." Madison's face flushed red. For a moment, I thought she might yell. Instead, she took a breath and said, "We will discuss this inside." Then she turned and walked toward the building, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. I stood there for a moment, keys still in my hand, aware that several coworkers had witnessed the exchange. Brian gave me a subtle thumbs up as he walked past. I went inside, logged into my computer at exactly 9 o'clock, and started my workday. The storm had arrived. The Silverline launch was scheduled for Saturday night at midnight. It was a new enterprise product targeting corporate training departments, our big push into that $2 million market Madison had secured by presenting my stolen research. The tech world would be watching. Success could establish us as a serious player in corporate learning. Failure would be public and damaging. I knew the launch was going to fail. I had known for 3 weeks, ever since I sent Madison an email explaining that our server capacity was insufficient for the projected user load. The infrastructure team had done load testing. The numbers were clear. We could handle maybe 5,000 simultaneous users comfortably. Madison was projecting 20,000 in the first hour, based on our pre-launch marketing and corporate partnerships. I had recommended doubling our server capacity. The cost was about $12,000. Not nothing, but not prohibitive for a major launch. Madison had responded to my email with a single line. Too expensive. Your projections are always overly cautious. Launch as planned. 2 weeks later, I tried again. Sent her the infrastructure team's analysis, showing the projected load versus our actual capacity. Recommended at minimum doing stress testing with our current setup so we knew exactly where the breaking point was. Her response: stop creating problems. Focus on your actual work. I forwarded both email chains to my personal email account and saved them in 3 different places. Then I worked my 40 hours per week and did not think about it. Saturday, I went hiking. Austin has beautiful trails in the hill country, and I had not been in over a year. I drove out early, spent the day walking through cedar and limestone, breathing air that did not smell like office coffee and stress. My phone was off, sitting in my car. The sun was warm. My legs ached from the climb. I felt human. Sunday morning, I slept in. Around 10 o'clock, I turned on my phone to check if my mom had texted about our usual Sunday call. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, all from Madison. The voicemails were a journey through the stages of panic. The first one, from Saturday evening around 8 o'clock. Deirdre, call me back as soon as you get this. We need to discuss some server capacity questions before the launch. By 11 o'clock Saturday night. Where are you? Why are not you answering? The infrastructure team has some concerns and you are the expert on this. Call me immediately. Midnight, the scheduled launch time. Deirdre, the servers are not responding correctly. We are delaying the launch by 1 hour. I need you to come to the office right now. 1 o'clock in the morning. Everything is crashing. 20,000 users are locked out. This is a disaster. Where the hell are you? 3 o'clock in the morning. I am calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow afternoon. You need to be there. This is non-negotiable. The text messages followed the same arc, from professional to demanding to angry to desperate to panicked. I sat on my couch, listening to them, feeling nothing. Just a strange, calm detachment. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. I looked at the clock. It was 10:15. I could make it. I took a shower, got dressed, and drove to the office. I arrived at 1:45, during work hours, and logged my time carefully. Emergency weekend coverage, which according to California labor law, the company had recently opened a small office in San Francisco, so we had to comply with their stricter regulations, meant overtime pay. The conference room was full. Madison sat at the head of the table, and she looked terrible. Hair pulled back messily, no makeup, eyes red and puffy. She had clearly not slept. The rest of the leadership team was there. Priya, our CTO, Richard, the CFO, Marcus from infrastructure, heads of sales and marketing. Thank you all for coming, Madison said, her voice hoarse. We had a significant issue with the Silver Line launch last night. Significant issue was an understatement. From what I gathered listening to the discussion, the launch had been a complete disaster. The servers crashed within minutes of going live. 20,000 users trying to access the system simultaneously overwhelmed our capacity, exactly as predicted. The system went down hard. Users got error messages. Social media exploded with complaints. Tech blogs picked up the story. Our customer service lines were flooded. We need to understand what went wrong, Madison said, looking around the table. Her eyes lingered on Marcus. The infrastructure team assured me we were ready. Marcus, who was 52 years old and had been with the company since its founding, did not flinch. Madison, I told you 3 weeks ago that Deirdre's capacity concerns were valid. She recommended we double our server allocation. You said no. That is not how I remember it, Madison said, but her voice was uncertain. I have the emails, Marcus said quietly. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. Here, Deirdre forwarded me her analysis. I backed up her numbers and sent you my own recommendation, you responded, and I quote, "We cannot spend money every time someone worries. Launch as planned." Madison's face went white, then red. I was trying to manage our resources responsibly. You were trying to save $12,000, Priya said. Her voice was calm but hard, and now we have lost at least 10 corporate contracts. That is easily $200,000 in revenue. plus the reputation damage. If Deirdre was so concerned, why was not she here this weekend? Madison's voice rose. Where were you, Deirdre? Your team needed you and you were nowhere to be found. Every eye in the room turned to me. I kept my voice level. I worked 40 hours last week, as contracted. I was not scheduled to work this weekend. This was an all-hands situation, Madison said. Everyone was here except you. Did you send me a formal request to work this weekend? With overtime authorization. I should not have to formally request anything. You should be committed to this company's success. I am committed during my scheduled working hours. If you needed weekend coverage, you should have planned for it or formally requested it with appropriate compensation. This is unbelievable, Madison said. She looked around the table, seeking support. Does anyone else find this attitude unacceptable? No one spoke. Priya was looking at her laptop screen. Richard was taking notes. Marcus was looking directly at me. Something like approval in his eyes. I think, Richard said carefully, that we need to focus on next steps. The launch failed. We need a recovery plan. The meeting continued for another hour, mapping out a strategy to salvage the situation. Additional servers would be brought online. A statement would be released to clients. The launch would be rescheduled for 2 weeks out. As the meeting was ending, Madison said, Deirdre, I need you to create a report explaining what went wrong. For the board, I can create an accurate report of what happened. I said, I need you to be a team player about this, Madison said, and there was something desperate in her voice now. The board does not need to know every little detail about internal discussions. The board deserves to know the truth, I said. Madison stared at me. Everyone else in the room suddenly found their papers very interesting. We will talk more about this, Madison said finally. The meeting ended. I went back to my desk, worked until 5:30, and drove home. My phone rang multiple times that evening. All Madison. I did not answer. Sunday night, at 11:47, I received an email. The subject line was, We need to talk. The sender was Thomas Hartwell. The message was brief. Deirdre, I have been getting updates from board members about the Silverline situation. Please prepare a full report on the launch and what led to the failure. Bring it to tomorrow's emergency board meeting. Be honest. I need to understand what really happened. Thomas. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that email. Thomas Hartwell, the founder, the man who built this company, was asking me directly for the truth. I opened my laptop and started writing. I worked until 3 in the morning, creating a meticulous report. Every decision, every warning I had given, every response from Madison, the stolen credit for my market research, the ignored capacity warnings, the timeline showing how we arrived at this disaster. Every claim was backed by email evidence, timestamps, documentation. I included no personal opinions, no emotional language, just facts, presented clearly and comprehensively. I attached 17 supporting documents, forwarded the complete email chains, built a timeline that was undeniable in its clarity. At 3:15 in the morning, I sent it to Thomas. Then I went to bed and slept for 4 hours. Monday morning, I arrived at the office at 8:30. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9. I wore my best professional outfit, carried my laptop and a printed copy of my report, and felt strangely calm, like I had finally stopped running and was standing still, waiting to see what happened next. As I walked toward the conference room, I saw Madison inside through the glass walls. She was setting up a presentation, moving quickly, clearly stressed. She looked up, saw me, and our eyes met. She knew. She knew I had sent Thomas a report. She knew the truth was about to come out. She turned back to her presentation, jaw set, preparing to fight. I took a breath and walked into the room. The conference room felt smaller with the full board present. Thomas Hartwell sat at the head of the table, and even though he looked older and frailer than I remembered, his eyes were sharp and alert. The 4 external board members sat on either side. Donald, the venture capitalist, Patricia, who ran her own tech company, James, a former Fortune 500 CEO, and Susan, a professor of business strategy. Our executive team filled the other seats. Madison, Richard, Priya, heads of sales and marketing, and me, sitting near the back, laptop closed, waiting. Madison started her presentation before everyone had even settled. She was moving fast, trying to control the narrative before anyone could interrupt. Her slides were slick, professional, full of charts and bullet points. The story she told was carefully crafted. According to Madison, the Silverline launch failed due to several factors: unexpected user demand that exceeded even the most optimistic projections, technical limitations with our infrastructure that the team had not adequately communicated, and a project manager, she did not name me directly, but everyone knew, who had assured her everything was ready and then failed to be available during the critical launch period. I take responsibility for trusting my team too much, Madison said, her voice earnest. I should have been more hands-on, should have questioned the technical assessments more thoroughly. But I also need to address a loyalty issue we are facing. When a launch is happening, the team needs to be all hands on deck. We had people who chose not to show up. She advanced to her next slide. It showed weekend work patterns for the project team. My name was highlighted, showing 0 hours worked over the launch weekend. Everyone else had contributed. Leadership means sacrifice, Madison continued. It means putting the company first. And when certain team members are not willing to make that commitment, it puts everyone else at risk. Patricia, one of the board members, raised her hand. Madison, what was the actual cause of the server failure? You mentioned technical limitations but did not get specific. Server capacity, Madison said quickly. We underestimated the load. Who did the capacity planning? The infrastructure team, working with the project management team. And what were their recommendations? Madison hesitated. Just for a second. They felt the existing capacity was sufficient. That is not accurate, Priya said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Deirdre provided capacity analysis showing we needed to double our server allocation. Marcus backed up her assessment. I reviewed the numbers myself and agreed. All three of us recommended the upgrade. It was a cost concern, Madison said. I had to balance investment against projected need. $12,000, Richard said, looking at his notes. That was the cost to upgrade. Is that correct? Approximately, yes. And what is the cost of this failure so far? Madison did not answer immediately. I have preliminary numbers, Richard continued. 10 corporate contracts canceled or on hold. That is $200,000 in immediate lost revenue. Reputation damage that will affect future sales. Conservatively, another $100,000 over the next quarter. Emergency server capacity we had to deploy this weekend, $20,000. Customer service overtime, $5,000. So we are looking at over $300,000 in costs to save $12,000. The room was very quiet. Thomas had not spoken yet. He was watching Madison, his expression unreadable. Now, he said, in a voice that was soft but carried complete authority. Deirdre, you have been quiet. What is your account of what happened? I opened my laptop. May I share my screen? Thomas nodded. I connected to the conference room display and opened my report. For the next 20 minutes, I walked through everything methodically. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. I showed my first email to Madison, sent 3 weeks before launch, with the infrastructure team's load testing results and the recommendation to upgrade capacity. I showed Madison's response, dismissing my concerns as overcautious. I showed my second email, 2 weeks before launch, reiterating the risk and strongly recommending, at minimum, we conduct stress testing. Madison's response telling me to stop creating problems. I showed Marcus' email backing up my assessment. Priya's note agreeing with the upgrade recommendation. All ignored. I showed the timeline of my work hours over the past 3 months. 320 hours of unpaid overtime. The weekends I worked without being asked, the late nights, the projects I took on as team members resigned. I showed the documentation of the raise request conversation, written in my personal notes the same day. Madison's statement that I was being selfish, her comment, which I had documented in writing within an hour of hearing it, that she could replace me with a college graduate for $50,000. I showed the market research and strategic analysis I had created for the corporate expansion and the board presentation, where Madison presented it as her own work without crediting me. I showed the security vulnerability incident, my urgent warnings, Madison's instruction to wait until Monday, my weekend work to patch it anyway, and Madison's announcement taking credit. Every claim had evidence. Email screenshots with full headers showing dates and times, infrastructure team analyses, work hour logs. Everything was there, laid out in undeniable sequence. When I finished, the room was silent. Donald, the venture capitalist, was the first to speak. Madison, is any of this inaccurate? Madison's hands were shaking. This is taken out of context. Deirdre has always been. She paused, searching for words. She is dramatic. She worries about everything. Part of leadership is making judgment calls about what concerns are valid and what are just anxiety. The infrastructure team lead backed up her assessment. Patricia said, "Is he dramatic too?" And the CTO, James added. 3 senior technical people gave you the same recommendation. You ignored all of them. I was trying to be fiscally responsible, Madison said. Her voice was rising. You all want me to cut costs and also spend money on every upgrade anyone suggests. I cannot do both. You could have done a cost-benefit analysis, Susan said. Her voice was not unkind, just matter of fact. $12,000 to prevent a potential $300,000 failure is a 97% reduction in risk. That is an easy call. And the credit taking, Patricia continued. Deirdre, that presentation Madison gave about corporate expansion. You created that. Yes, I said. She asked me to research the market. I spent 3 weeks on analysis and strategy. I sent her a 40-page document. She presented it verbatim to the board as her own strategic vision. Patricia looked at Madison. Is that true? Madison opened her mouth, closed it. Deirdre did background research. I synthesized it into a coherent strategy. I read that presentation, Donald said. It was extremely detailed. Competitive analysis, financial projections, go-to-market strategy. That was not synthesis. That was original strategic work. Thomas had been sitting silently through all of this. Now he stood up. The room immediately quieted. He looked older than I remembered, moved more carefully, but when he spoke, it was with the authority of someone who had built this company from nothing and still commanded respect. I have been watching for the past 2 months, he said. Board members forwarded me concerns. I read every report. I have been in communication with employees at all levels. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped my daughter would grow into the role. He looked at Madison. There was sadness in his eyes, but also resolution. Madison, you are removed from operational duties effective immediately. Priya will serve as interim VP of operations while we conduct a search for a permanent replacement. Madison gasped. Dad, you cannot. You will remain on the board in a non-voting advisory role, but you are not ready to lead this company. Maybe someday. Not now. Madison's face crumpled. I have worked so hard. You took credit for other people's work, Thomas said quietly. You ignored expert advice to save money and caused a disaster. You called an employee selfish for asking to be paid fairly after giving you hundreds of hours of unpaid overtime. That is not leadership. That is ego and insecurity. He turned to me. Deirdre, I am offering you the position of Director of Project Management. You will report directly to Priya. 25% salary increase to $90,000. Comprehensive benefits review. And I am authorizing back payment for your documented overtime hours from the past 6 months, if you want it. I could not speak. Could not even process what was happening. The room was absolutely silent, everyone staring at me. You have earned it, Thomas said. You have been carrying this company. It is time we recognize that properly. I accept. I managed to say. My voice sounded strange, distant. Madison stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. Tears were streaming down her face. She looked at her father, at the board, at me. Then she turned and ran from the room. The door closed behind her. No one moved. Meeting adjourned, Thomas said. Priya, Deirdre, stay for a moment. The rest of you, thank you. The room cleared slowly. I sat frozen in my chair, hands trembling, barely able to believe what had just happened. Thomas waited until everyone else had left, then sat down heavily. He suddenly looked very tired. "Deirdre, I am sorry," he said. "I put you in an impossible position. I wanted Madison to succeed so badly that I ignored the signs. I failed you and I failed this company. You did not know," I said. "I should have. That is my job." He looked at Priya. "Work with Deirdre to build a project management team that is properly resourced. No more 60-hour weeks as standard practice. No more unpaid overtime. We do this right or we do not do it." Priya nodded. "Agreed." Thomas stood up to leave, then paused. "Deirdre, what you did took courage. Standing up for yourself when the easy path was to just keep your head down. We need more of that here. Thank you." After he left, I sat alone in the conference room for a long time, staring at the table, trying to understand what had just happened. My life had just changed. Completely. Irrevocably. And I had changed it myself, simply by deciding I was worth more than how I was being treated. 2 months passed. 2 months of changes, adjustments, and slowly learning to breathe again. The morning after that board meeting, I woke up expecting to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted, wrung out, almost grieving. Which sounds strange, given that I had just won, but there is no winning without loss. And what I had lost was the person I used to be, the person who believed that loyalty and hard work were always rewarded, who trusted that good things came to those who sacrificed everything. That person was gone, and I was still figuring out who I had become. Madison cleared out her office the same day as the board meeting. I never saw her again. According to company gossip, she resigned from the board within a week and took a job at another tech startup. Then, 3 months later, I heard through mutual connections that she had been let go from that position as well. I felt a strange mixture of pity and relief when I heard. She was not a villain. Not really. Just someone given too much responsibility too soon, unable to admit what she did not know, unable to value the people who could have helped her succeed. My first week as director of project management was overwhelming. I had an office now, with a window, and 4 project managers reporting directly to me. One of them was Brian, who I promoted immediately. He deserved it, and I needed people I could trust. My first official act was to institute a clear overtime policy. Any work beyond 40 hours per week required director-level approval and was compensated either with overtime pay or comp time off, employee's choice. No more assumption that weekend work was just part of the culture. No more martyrdom as a job requirement. My second act was to bring the QA team back to full strength. We rehired 2 of the people Madison had let go. Sarah, the veteran QA tester, cried when I called to offer her job back. She had been working at a soul-crushing corporate job and missed our mission. We reinstated weekly all-hands meetings. The first one I ran, I was terrified. Standing in front of 75 people, many of whom had watched the drama unfold, explaining the new direction, but the room was warm, supportive. People asked questions, shared ideas. It felt like we were building something together again instead of being cogs in someone else's machine. The culture started healing, slowly at first, then faster. People began leaving at 5:30. Actually leaving, not just saying they would and then working from home. The office felt lighter. Biscuit, our golden retriever mascot, seemed happier, getting more attention during the day as people took actual breaks. I hired 3 more project managers over the next month, bringing us back to full staffing. I created a mentorship program, pairing junior employees with senior ones. I established clearer communication channels between departments. I did all the things I had wanted to do for years but never had the authority to implement. And I worked 45 hours a week, sometimes 50 during genuinely busy periods, but never 60, never 70. I had learned that lesson too well. My personal life slowly reassembled itself. I went to my nephew's 9th birthday party dressed as Spider-Man because that was his current obsession. We played games in the backyard, ate too much cake, and I stayed until the very end, helping clean up. My sister hugged me and whispered, "I missed you." I reconnected with Jenna, my best friend who I had been too busy to see. We met for dinner, and I apologized for missing her wedding. for disappearing from her life. She cried and told me she understood but had been so worried. We talked for 4 hours, catching up, laughing, remembering who we were before jobs and responsibilities consumed us. I even started dating a guy named Colin who I met at a coffee shop. He was a teacher, funny and kind, with a complete inability to understand the tech industry, which I found refreshing. On our third date, he asked why I kept checking my phone. I realized it was habit, the old anxiety that some work emergency needed my attention. I put my phone in my purse and did not check it again all evening. Mom noticed the difference immediately during our Sunday calls. She said I sounded like myself again. I had not realized I had stopped sounding like myself. 3 weeks after my promotion, Thomas came back to the office for his weekly advisory visit. He asked me to lunch, just the two of us, at a quiet restaurant near the office. "How are you doing?" he asked after we ordered. "Honestly, I am still processing," I said. "Some days I feel guilty for how it turned out with Madison." "Do not," Thomas said firmly. "I need you to hear this. What happened to Madison was not your fault. I set her up to fail by giving her authority she was not ready for. She made it worse by refusing to learn, by taking credit for others' work, by treating people like resources instead of humans. You simply stopped enabling the dysfunction. That took courage. It did not feel courageous. It felt selfish. That is what people in power call it when you stop letting them exploit you," Thomas said. "Selfish. It is not. It is self-respect." He paused, looking out the window at downtown Austin. "I built this company on a mission: help kids who do not have the advantages my daughter had. And I was so focused on securing her advantages that I forgot the mission. I gave her a job she did not earn because she was my daughter. That helped no one. Not her, not the company, not you, not the kids we serve. She could have been good at it," I said. "If she had been willing to learn. Maybe. Someday. But leadership cannot be inherited. It has to be earned. And you earned it by doing the right thing even when it was hard, even when it cost you, even when everyone told you that you were being unreasonable." He looked at me directly. "You know what I regret most? Not the business decisions. Those can be fixed. I regret that you had to fight so hard just to be treated fairly. That should have been the baseline, not the victory." I cried a little at lunch that day, quietly, into my napkin. Thomas pretended not to notice and changed the subject to a technical problem he was puzzling through. By the time we walked back to the office, I felt lighter. The Silverline launch was rescheduled for 6 weeks after the initial disaster. This time, we did it right. Proper capacity planning, adequate testing, realistic timeline. I worked closely with the infrastructure team, with Priya, with everyone involved. We launched on a Wednesday afternoon instead of Saturday night, so the team was fresh and available if anything went wrong. Nothing went wrong. The launch went smoothly. Positive reviews, happy customers. Tech blogs wrote articles about our recovery, praising the company for fixing its mistakes and delivering a quality product. Madison was not there to see it. But I was, and so was the team that built it. Properly staffed, properly supported, properly valued. Friday evening, exactly 2 months after the board meeting, I saved my work at 5:45 and shut down my computer. The office was mostly empty. People had actually left at 5:30. Brian waved goodnight from across the room, heading out to dinner with his family. I walked through the quiet office, past my new office with its window view, past the conference room where my life had changed, out to the parking lot. The Texas sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I stood for a moment in the spot where Madison had confronted me in the parking lot, desperate and demanding. That felt like a lifetime ago. I got in my car, turned on the radio, rolled down the windows. I had dinner plans with Colin, then we were going to see a movie. Tomorrow, I was sleeping in and then going hiking with Jenna. Sunday, family dinner at my sister's house. My weekend was full of life, not work. As I drove toward the restaurant, I thought about everything I had learned over these past months. I learned that valuing yourself is not selfish. It is essential. When you set boundaries, you teach others how to treat you. When you document the truth, you protect yourself and give others the courage to speak up too. When you stand firm in your worth, you create space for others to do the same. Madison taught me what not to be. Insecure leadership that steals credit instead of sharing it. Management that demands sacrifice instead of earning loyalty. Authority wielded through fear instead of respect. But I taught myself who I could become, not by working harder, which I had already done to the point of destruction, by working smarter, by understanding that my value was not measured in hours sacrificed, but in problems solved, in teams built, in missions advanced. The company did not fall apart when I stopped overworking. That was the revelation that changed everything. I had believed I was indispensable, that without my constant vigilance and endless hours, everything would collapse. But it turned out the company fell apart when incompetence was protected and excellence was exploited. When people were treated as disposable and boundaries were called selfishness. Real leadership is not about how many hours you can extract from people. It is about enabling them to do their best work while having a life worth living. It is about building systems that work without anyone destroying themselves to maintain them. It is about creating a culture where people stay because they want to, not because they are too exhausted to leave. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say no. Set a boundary. Stop enabling the dysfunction. And watch as everything you built proves it can stand without you sacrificing yourself on its altar. That is not selfish. That is wisdom. I arrived at the restaurant, found parking, and walked in to find Colin already at a table, smiling when he saw me. I hugged him, sat down, ordered a glass of wine, and felt something I had not felt in years. Present. Fully present in my own life instead of constantly thinking about what I needed to do next for work. I had won. Not by destroying Madison, though that was how it might have looked from the outside. I won by reclaiming myself, by deciding I was worth more than how I was being treated, by standing up for that belief even when it was terrifying. And now I was teaching an entire team that they were worth the same, that their time mattered, that their boundaries deserved respect, that excellence did not require martyrdom. 3 more employees successfully negotiated raises in the month after my promotion. 2 others spoke up about unrealistic deadlines and got support instead of criticism. The culture was changing, slowly but surely, into something healthier. I thought about Madison sometimes, hoped she was learning the lessons she needed to learn. I bore her no ill will. She was not evil, just unprepared and too proud to admit it. Maybe someday she would figure it out, maybe not. That was not my responsibility. My responsibility was to the team I led, the mission we served, and the person I saw in the mirror each morning. I owed her honesty, boundaries, and the courage to value herself. Everything else would follow. So, let me ask you something, because I know many of you watching this are facing similar situations. Have you ever found yourself working endless unpaid hours, told that asking for fair compensation is selfish, watching others take credit for your work? What did you do about it? Did you set boundaries? Or are you still sacrificing yourself, hoping it will eventually be recognized? Drop a comment and share your story. I would love to hear how you handled it, what you learned, what you wish you had done differently. Your experience might help someone else who is struggling with the same choice right now. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own boundaries and worth, do me a favor. Hit that like button so more people can find this story. Subscribe to the channel because I share more stories like this, about real people facing real workplace challenges and finding their way through. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe a friend who is drowning in overwork, or a colleague who is being undervalued. Sometimes we need to hear that standing up for ourselves is not just okay, it is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope it gave you something to think about, maybe even the courage to set a boundary or ask for what you are worth. You deserve to work for an organization that values you. You deserve to have a life outside of work, and you deserve to know that your worth is not measured by how much you are willing to sacrifice. Take care of yourselves. Value yourselves, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply stop enabling the people who are exploiting you. Until next time.